And now it is our honor to introduce Chairman of Games for Change Board, Asi Burak.
Good morning. I see a lot of familiar faces. On behalf of the Games for Change Board of Directors, welcome to the second day of the festival. I'm Asi Burak, and I'm delighted to be here in this important milestone, the 20th annual anniversary for the Games for Change Festival. A bit of applause for the... And obviously, we're not only celebrating the organization, we're celebrating the field. I had the privilege of being the president of Games for Change from 2010 to 15. Now I'm the chairman, and as I like to say, the best decision I ever made was to hire Susanna to transition and take the lead after me. Which is to say, I had a front row seat in the organization and community's exciting journey in the last 2 decades. Yesterday, you heard some of the founders, the original founders of the organization, and how the past and present come together. I'd like to offer a complementary perspective focused on the phenomenal growth of this field as we've seen it since 2004. So I'm sharing my 2 cents, which is 2 reflections on the history from my modest personal perspective. The first one is about the surprising and unpredictable evolution of the medium. Those of us who were here from the beginning were almost like invited to turn into amateur anthropologists or historians and try to reflect on what transpired versus our predictions. You know, what were our expectations and where we ended. So as you hear often, when a new medium is being introduced to the world, creators, naturally, the first thing that they do is build on the old media that they are so familiar with, right? So when TV was introduced to the world, the first early TV shows behaved like theater. They had a static stage, and they didn't figure out yet all the concepts and tools and methods like moving the camera or editing. This only came later. In the same way, when Games for Change started, people spoke about this as interactive documentaries. In the first years, that was the whole framework that we worked with. And the main innovation that people talked about was the idea that, unlike a documentary, here people get the choices, they have the agency, they can make their own journey and change the outcome and the script. However, 20 years later, if you look at what this genre or sub-genre developed into, you would see much more than interactive documentaries. So just a few examples that I wanted to share. Obviously, you know most of them, if not all of them. Who would believe that one day we'll have FDA-approved games that have direct neurological impact and can mitigate ADHD or cognitive decline? Who had thought we'd see citizen science games, where a large group of people come together to solve science problems that evaded scientists and evaded the supercomputers for decades? Who had imagined we'd experience XR that is so nuanced and masterful in the search for empathy and generating empathy? And we're just at the beginning. And all those examples, in my mind, are coupled by the gift of game-making tools. They flourish, and the idea that we can now introduce people in all ages, but especially young people, to this art and being able to make games with coding, but also without coding. The interesting thing when I think of this first reflection is that it's not only about the diversity of experiences or interfaces of the genre. What happened in the last 20 years is that we have a diversity of impact, of types of impact, from behavior change to awareness to, as we said, direct impact on brain cells through games. Second reflection is about acceptance and maturity. When we started off, early developers of Games for Impact, and I was one of them, an indie developer in the field, we began addressing serious issues, so-called serious issues. And by the way, the field at the beginning was also called serious games. Poverty, human rights, global conflict. And we had a lot of skeptics and naysayers, whether it was in the press, in the industry, in the larger gaming industry, that came to us and said, you know, games are about escapism. You know, players want to escape reality. They don't want to engage with reality. People came to us and said, actually blamed us for taking out the joy and fun out of games. You know, we're making them too serious. People told us that games are about pure joy. They're not about, you know, tragic issues or sad issues or heavy issues. And I think that those assumptions, which seemed very obvious to them, in the judgment of time, in the judgment of this evolution, they're simply very reductive and narrow-minded. The community, the organization, the field have proved that we're just scratching the surface. Generally speaking, video games only getting stronger. They speak to more people, to broader ages, to more tastes. The definition of a gamer is obsolete because there are only few of us who are not playing a game on a platform, one or another, right? In the subway or elsewhere. People who grew up with games have become the decision makers of today, the policy makers of today. And as such, we are entering an era where the possibilities for games are wide open. It is now globally accepted, this is about the acceptance, that video games, just like any media that came before them, could address anyone at any time and touch any nerve, any emotion, and any intellectual pursuit. Light or dark, small or large, intimate or public, frightening or delightful, it's all game. And furthermore, games will find ways to do this that we never experienced before, because this is all about using their unique attributes. So if I want to leave you with one lesson or reflection on, you know, out of those 2 points, is that natural evolution is really fantastic. It's true that we had many creators and individuals and organizations that helped. It's true that we had a backwind of a medium that expanded to 3 billion people. However, at the core of what makes this time so different than 2004, in my mind, is really human creativity. As long as human creativity is thriving and encouraged, we will never be able to predict how the field will look like at 2044. I can make the one prediction, it will 100% blow our minds. Thank you, enjoy the day, hope to meet you in the halls.